Welcome. My name is Allison Quintilla, and my pronouns are she, her.
My name is Benji Harrington, and my pronouns are they, them. We are Masters of Occupational Therapy students at Dominican University of California, and we are completing a capstone project on the occupations of transgender college students. Transgender Americans have long faced discrimination for the ways they challenge the established gender norms of their society, and college campuses are no exception. As we know, occupations are necessarily influenced by the environments and contexts that they take place within. As societal views and treatment of transgender people change in the United States, transgender people must navigate a variety of conflicting cultural and social contexts as they engage in their everyday occupations. Occupations unique to the transgender community alone have yet to be identified. However, transgender people do experience occupation through a different lens than their cisgender peers. Transgender people must be conscious of how their gender is presented and perceived by others as they go about any occupation. Transgender people may engage in specific occupations in an effort to pass, which is to be perceived by others as the gender with which they identify. The desire to pass is twofold. First, transgender people often want to be recognized by others as the gender they are without having to explain or define themselves. And second, transgender people may want to pass as cisgender in order to avoid transgender discrimination, or transphobia. Almost half of all transgender people in the US report being denied equal treatment and experiencing discrimination and/or violence based on their gender identity. Many states still do not have non-discrimination laws that protect transgender people. The 2015 US Transgender Survey of over 27,000 transgender Americans revealed some serious inequities for transgender people in education. 77% of people who were out or perceived to be transgender in kindergarten through high school reported experiencing some form of harassment. 54% experienced physical violence because of their gender identity. 1/4 of people who were out as transgender at their college or university reported experiencing verbal, physical, or sexual harassment because of their gender. The unemployment rate amongst transgender Americans was 3 times higher than the unemployment rate of the US population, and almost half of all respondents had not completed a college degree. Our mission was to understand where these inequities exist on college and university campuses in America, and how universities can enact meaningful change to support occupational equity for transgender students.
We began with a survey of UC Berkeley campus, but due to the COVID-19 shutdown, our project was moved to the virtual context, which allowed us to use social media to reach out to transgender students across the United States. We collected responses from transgender students, transgender staff, cisgender students, and one cisgender staff person. Transgender student participants came from a wide range of majors, as well as a wide variety of genders and sexualities. Racial, socioeconomic, and age data was not collected. We included cisgender people in our survey needs assessment to be able to see if cisgender people were aware of and accurately understanding the experiences of transgender students. We utilized a survey that collected both qualitative and quantitative data on experiences of transgender students and the breadth and effectiveness of existing transgender resources on college campuses. Anonymous surveys were distributed on Berkeley campus via flyers and on social media through advertisements on transgender conversation boards and virtual spaces. Our survey questions focused on both occupational engagements, environments, and contexts as they influence the occupational experiences of transgender students. Quantitative results were gathered via Likert scale, and qualitative information was obtained from short answer questions. Qualitative data was coded via inductive coding methods. Many questions focused specifically on resources on campus that are meant to address the needs of transgender students. These questions allowed us to identify which programs and program elements were most effective and helpful, and where there are still areas of improvement. These results inform our development of recommendations for colleges to implement and support equitable access to higher education for transgender students.
Transgender students reported numerous instances of dead naming, the use of a transgender person's legal name or name assigned at birth that they do not use as their name anymore, and misgendering, the use of incorrect gendered terms and pronouns, such as referring to a trans man as she. Transgender people also reported significant lack of bathrooms, living facilities, and changing rooms where students felt safe to engage in their occupations. Lack of transgender inclusive and non-gendered facilities and programs create barriers to transgender students' engagement in education, ADLs, IADLs, work, leisure, and socialization. Many of our participants noted that transgender students experience unique needs that are not met in the same way that cisgender students' needs are met. Additionally, transgender participants identified systemic transphobia as a barrier to accessing higher education. Cisgender people overall viewed their universities as being more supportive of and safe for transgender students as compared to transgender students and staff's lower support and safety ratings. Transgender students identified professors' lack of knowledge about transgender people and terminology as a significant influence on their negative experiences. Such responses included students who were repeatedly dead-named and misgendered by professors, often in front of other students, as well as a lack of transgender inclusion in curriculum where it would have been appropriate. Healthcare inequities and barriers constituted a large portion of students' negative experiences with campus resources. Students reported being misgendered and dead-named even after explicitly stating their correct name and pronouns, and having access to healthcare being significantly delayed due to being referred to a transgender health specialist for non-transgender health-related issues, such as common illnesses. Some participants relayed stories of times they and other students had not outed themselves as transgender or had otherwise pretended to be cisgender in order to receive healthcare services at their school, and felt that they had received better treatment than the times they revealed their gender orientation.
Programs and resources where all staff had training and understanding of transgender experiences and terminology were identified as helping students feel safe, supported, and providing greater supports than programs where staff lacked adequate transgender knowledge. Additionally, resources that allowed transgender students to connect with other transgender people at their college or community were highly praised for their effectiveness in counteracting the psychosocial impact of experiencing transphobia on campus. Many participants expressed feelings of isolation and othering on their college campuses. However, those who identified community building resources at their university stated that these programs were a significant support for their social and emotional wellness. Many programs, including those designed to meet the needs of LGBTQ+ students and other minority groups on campus, often lacked sufficient inclusion and representation of transgender students and their experiences. The experiences of respondents indicate that no one program alone can meet all the needs of transgender students, but rather that it is a collective effort from all areas of campus that best supports their equitable educational engagement. We plan to meet with representatives from housing, registrar, curriculum development, diversity groups, student life, and more from our university to present and collaborate on how they can support the equitable occupational engagement of transgender students through implementing a transgender inclusion program. We will be introducing a program that was tailored by the participants' responses and presenting ideas on how to achieve occupational equity between transgender and cisgender students. The presentation will end with a discussion of how those attending feel they can or cannot implement this program, as well as a follow-up survey to collect responses and impressions on how these program recommendations can best be implemented. The program will be reevaluated based on this collaborative feedback.
When transgender students face barriers to occupational engagement not faced by cisgender students, they experience occupational injustice. As OTs, we have a unique lens to understand how social and physical contexts affect engagement in occupations. We have a role in advocating for populations who experience occupational injustice. This transgender student inclusion program will add to the breadth of occupational therapy knowledge, understanding, and awareness of occupational needs of gender minorities. We hope to empower occupational therapists and students to advocate for the changes needed to achieve occupational equity for transgender students. We are developing a 10-part transgender student inclusion program that addresses the areas identified by our participants as the highest levels of need. The recommendations of this program are based on both the areas of strengths and the limitations and areas of needs identified by our participants' reports of the resources on their campus. Each section presents ways that colleges and universities can implement changes to support equitable occupational engagement for transgender students. This transgender inclusion program includes recommended changes for gender-neutral facilities, transgender inclusive housing, name changes in their school registration and paperwork, transgender healthcare accessibility, faculty and staff training, and transgender curriculum integration. We also include information on how colleges can counteract person-to-person and systemic transphobia, such as specific programs and scholarships to meet transgender students' needs, addressing transphobia with the same levity shown to other cases of bigotry and hate crimes on campus, and most importantly, listening to their transgender students, taking their concerns and experiences seriously, and enacting the changes students need to see on their college campuses.
If you would like to know more about our project and this transgender inclusion program, want to see the program once it is completed, or have any questions about the transgender inclusion project, or how you can support occupational equity for transgender students at your college or university, we encourage you to contact us at the email below. Our email is tcsdominican@gmail.com. That is tcsdominican@dominican.com. At gmail.com. Thank you for coming to our presentation.